Hello everyone, welcome to the session today. We will be talking about low proficiency learners, the big picture. The objectives of the lesson today include to understand what proficiency is and examples of tests of proficiency, to get an overview of different frameworks of proficiency levels, to examine the factors that could affect levels of proficiency, and to discuss how to enable learners to develop higher proficiency. Let us first try and understand what is meant by the term proficiency. Proficiency refers to the ability of an individual to perform an action or a function. In the scope of language learning context, individuals' ability to produce and understand language and ultimately accomplish the task of communicating is considered to be proficiency. A proficient language user is one who can accomplish a range of language tasks across various topics with ease. Each person is unique and therefore not all students attain the same level of proficiency in the same time period. However, the aim of language education should always be to ensure that all students should be able to increase their proficiency each year if they are in a language learning program. But assessing language proficiency is a critical component of program evaluation. It is also an important way to provide students with accurate feedback on their developing abilities in the language. What do you think is a proficiency test? A test that aims to identify the student's ability in the 4 skills of language is known as a proficiency test. Unlike other forms of language tests such as achievement tests or diagnostic tests, it is not linked to any particular course of instruction but measures the learner's general level of language mastery. This means that there is no definite syllabus which a test taker can cover to score higher marks. However, most English language proficiency tests base their testing items on high frequency count vocabulary and general basic grammar. Some tests have been standardized for worldwide use. International English Language Testing System, or more popularly known as the IELTS, is one such. Another example is the TOEFL, or Test of English as a Foreign Language. A third is ELPT, that is English Language Proficiency Test. Unlike an achievement test in which it is possible to get all the answers correct, a proficiency test does not allow for a perfect score, nor does it compare the results of the test to other test takers. In proficiency tests, the performance is compared to a set of pre-decided criteria. A proficiency test is not limited to any specific course, curriculum, or single skill in the language. It includes standardized multiple choice items on grammar, vocabulary, reading comprehension, oral comprehension, and sometimes a sample of writing as well. For example, let us take the TOEFL. It is a standardized proficiency test designed by the Educational Testing Service. It is used by nearly 1,000 institutions of higher education in the United States as an indicator of a prospective student's ability to undertake academic work in an English medium scenario. The Common European Framework of Reference for Languages, Learning, Teaching and Assessment, or abbreviated as CEFR or CEF, and the second one, American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages, or more popularly known as ACTFL. The CEFR is a guideline used to describe achievements of learners of foreign languages across Europe. It was put together by the Council of Europe as the main part of the project Language Learning for European Citizenship between 1989 and 1996. It was designed to provide a transparent, coherent, and comprehensive basis for the elaboration of language syllabuses and curriculum guidelines, the design of teaching and learning materials, and the assessment of foreign language proficiency. It is now available in over 40 languages. The 6 reference levels are becoming widely accepted as the European standard for grading an individual's language proficiency. The American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages, or ACTFL Proficiency Guidelines, describes what individuals can do with language in terms of listening, speaking, reading, and writing in real-world situations in a spontaneous manner. These guidelines identify 5 major levels: distinguished, superior, advanced, intermediate, and novice. The first 3 levels, that is advanced, intermediate, and novice, are subdivided into high, medium, and low sublevels. It traces the continuum of proficiency from that of the highly articulate, well-educated language user to a level of little or no functional ability. These guidelines present the levels of proficiency as ranges and describe what an individual can and cannot do with language at each level, without any concern for how the language was learned or acquired. It is important to know that the guidelines are not based on any particular theory, pedagogical method, or educational curriculum. They neither describe how an individual learns a language nor provides tips or methods for learners and teachers on how to learn a language, and they should not be used for such purposes either. The guidelines are an instrument for the evaluation of functional language ability. The ACTFL levels are primarily used in academic circles. Look at the screen to get a better understanding of the ACTFL levels. The above diagram shows how the ACTFL separates learners' performances into ranges, explaining what the learner is able to do in different contexts, how much language a learner can produce and understand, how accurate he or she is, and what strategies he or she can put into use to accomplish communication. The ACTFL performance descriptors for language learners are organized according to 3 ranges of performances, which include novice range, intermediate range, and advanced range. 3 modes of communication, that is interpersonal, interpretive, and presentational. The domains of performance are further subdivided into parameters for the language learner's performance and how well the language learner is able to be understood and to understand. The parameters for the language learner's performance is further subdivided into functions, which include global tasks the learners can perform in the language, contexts, situations within which the learner can function, content, topics which the learner can understand and discuss, text type, that which the learner is able to understand and produce in order to perform the functions of the level. In how well the language learner is able to be understood and to understand, we have the categories which include language control. How accurate is the language learner's language? Vocabulary. How extensive and applicable is the language learner's vocabulary? Communication strategies. How does the language learner maintain communication and make meaning in conversations? And cultural awareness. How is the language learner's cultural knowledge reflected in language use? As teachers of language, it can be beneficial to know these descriptors of language proficiency. It will help teachers to design tasks which are targeted at different levels and ranges and enable learners to perform the functions in the language. The teachers will also be able to design tasks with contextual use of language and also for accuracy and fluency wherever the need arises. Based on the proficiency guidelines discussed in the previous module, it is clear that learners have different abilities while performing. In a study conducted by Normazida, Koo and Hazita in 2012 and Travinsky in 2005, factors that affect performance in English were investigated. The studies reported the following factors that impact the EFL learners to have poor performance in English language learning. These are presented as follows. English is regarded as a difficult subject to learn. The teachers are viewed as figures of authority. There is a lack of support and opportunity to use English in the home environment and in the community. Learners have insufficient and/or lack exposure to the language as there is a limited opportunity to use English outside the classrooms. Students have a limited vocabulary proficiency as well as English reading materials are not always readily available to the learners. Learners have an unwillingness and lack of motivation to learn English as they do not see the immediate need to use the language outside the classroom scenario. Lack of motivation for learning or the negative attitude towards the target language also forms another detrimental factor. Let's see how some of these aforementioned factors can affect performance and overall proficiency of English language learners or ELLS. Motivation for English language learning. In general, motivation is recognized as one of the most significant factors affecting students' performance of second language or L2 learning. Learners could be lacking motivation to learn the language because of a number of factors such as finding no real purpose to learn the language, lack of interest, methods of learning, and so on. Motivation can influence learners' freedom, attention, attempt, patience, the frequency of using learning strategies, and their learning success. Learners would enjoy or have interest in learning a second or foreign language when they receive motivation, especially internal motivation, because it could be well predicted by perceived second language ability and independence. While being motivated and interested from within is definitely a huge factor for success, some external factors can also impact the motivational level of learners. Finding a real purpose in learning the language can be a great source of motivation. If the learners can see that learning the language can give them tangible results such as a job or a promotion, it will definitely boost their levels of interest in the learning of the target language. Some of the affective factors include stress and anxiety in language classrooms. Language learning is a long process and different learners progress at a different pace. It can be very stressful for learners when they cannot see a tangible progress in their performance. This is especially true for learning grammar and vocabulary. Taking a long time for learning an aspect of grammar or vocabulary is very common, and it can have its toll on learners when they are not aware of the process involved in language learning. This coupled with the anxiety of performing in class and tests, can have an effect on the proficiency levels of the learners. Language learning strategies. Learning strategies are the methods that learners use to obtain information. Normally, high achievers use more learning strategies than lower achieving learners, as found by Dembo in 2004. There were several unsuccessful students in their study because they often failed to apply learning strategies appropriately to the task at hand. The researchers believe that learning strategies are significant in second language acquisition motivation. It provides the learners tools for achieving the goal. Students are able to overcome their weakness in some learning styles with suitable strategy training, and learning strategies can influence students' learning achievements. Learning strategies can also enhance students to become good learners of a language. Oxford in 2001 classifies the characteristics of good language learners and says that he or she is an enthusiastic and accurate guesser, has a strong drive to communicate, is uninhibited and ready to make mistakes, emphasizes on form by looking at patterns and using analysis, takes input from all practice opportunities, monitors his or her own speech and that of others, pays attention to meaning. Much research has shown the correlation between using language learning strategies and performance and achievement in the language learning process. So, if learners are able to use strategies to troubleshoot the gaps in their learning, it will likely increase their levels of proficiency to a much larger extent. Some of the other factors that may affect learner proficiency are as follows. Familiarity between the first and second languages can have an impact on proficiency. Corder in 1981 and Nation in 2001 have expressed that for learners whose first language is closely related to the second language, the learning burden of most words will be lesser. For learners whose first language is not related to the target language, the learning burden is comparatively higher. So, when the linguistic distance between the learner's first language and the second language is closer, it is easier for the learner to pick up the target language. The teacher is the most important source of learning a new language. While it is important to receive knowledge from the language teacher, students also need to be offered various opportunities for constructing their language knowledge both in the classroom and outside as well. Learning takes place through repeated interaction with the social environment that learners begin to build linguistic proficiency. Therefore, the ELLs need to have an environment in which they are able to express their opinion, use real-life activities in the classroom, and finally have friends to converse in English with. Thirdly, beliefs about language learning can be referred to as opinions or views held by people on language learning. Wenden in 1986 and Horwitz in 1988 stated that the learner's beliefs could influence their learning. Examples of the influence of beliefs on language learning include the ways learners react to particular teaching methods, the way they evaluate their learning progress, and the way they use language learning strategies. Learner beliefs such as children can learn languages easily compared to adults. It is important to speak with perfect pronunciation or practicing English with native speakers or native level speakers can also be beneficial. These have an impact on the performance and the ability to learn a new language. Pika in 1994 identified 4 conditions for successful language learning. The first is learners should be given input that is made meaningful and comprehensible. Number 2, learners selectively attend to the form of the input as well as its meaning. Number 3, learners must produce the second language. And finally, learners should be given feedback toward greater comprehensibility, appropriateness, and accuracy. Based on the discussions in the earlier modules, we can arrive at a few ways to help our learners of English and enable them to perform better. Some of the ways in which teachers can help the learners are as follows. It is important to make students aware of their own learning process and all the learning strategies actually available to them. In order for students to learn to use learning strategies, teachers might emphasize on two areas. The first area focuses on teaching learning strategies that accelerate language learning, such as how to make the connections between the new concepts with the things that learners already know. The second area of consideration includes the attention that teachers give to students' explorations of learning strategies, such as making the connection between the new concepts and the things which learners are already aware of. These strategies include practicing English by making use of new language input as well as constantly writing and speaking in the target language. Another way to help learners improve their performance is through support and opportunity. It is necessary that teachers enrich the learning environment in the classroom by offering more opportunities for students to learn to use and practice English more. While inside the classroom, activities definitely impact learning, there is only so much that a teacher can do within the stipulated time frame for each class. Therefore, activities which allow students to practice English outside the classroom also help to a large extent. This is especially needed in a context like ours, which is a multilingual society and English is only the second language. Most learners of English in our country do not speak English at home and also do not practice speaking English once they leave the school. Practicing conversations with other students several times, watching television programs in English outside the classroom, and using the real-life activities in the classroom are important for language learning. It is important that learners are exposed to meaningful input in various contexts to acquire the target language effectively, and may need to be offered opportunities to use English both receptively and productively. Learning takes place through repeated interaction with the social environment that learners begin to build linguistic proficiency. Therefore, the ELLs need to have an environment in which they are able to express their opinion and use the real-life activities in the classroom. Language learners also perceive that applying the language that they have learned in their daily life was important for language learning. It may be of help to learners if they knew what classroom activities help the learner to learn the language. This may be true especially for adult learners who learn English for specific purposes. If learners are informed about what they are learning and how it will help them, it may also boost their interest levels in learning the new language. English language learners need to be better informed about the availability of English materials and given easy access to such materials outside the classroom contact hours. Some studies like Green and Oxford in 1995 have found that more proficient learners contact other sources outside the classroom for improving their language skills. These might include watching televisions and film in the target language, listening to the radio, and reading materials in the target language. Therefore, providing English language learners with easy access to authentic input in the target language via various means both in and especially outside the classroom, can lead to increased motivation and more positive attitudes towards language learning. In turn, this will help to transfer the low proficiency learner into a high proficiency learner of the target language. With this, we come to the conclusion of the program today. Hope you had a good time. Thank you.